Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the All Systems Go podcast. I'm your host, of course, you heard it in the intro, Chris L. Davis, and today I have a friend of mine, and I don't use that term loosely. I say it because I was able to connect with our guest today in person when I was doing trainings for Active Campaign, and we just stay connected. If he reaches out to me and needs something and I have it, I supply it, and vice versa. And it's really great to have those types of relationships in marketing and in business and entrepreneurship. So, with that being said, our guest today is Oscar Garcia, and he is a sought after consultant, coach, and speaker specializing in online marketing and the host of the highly rated podcast, The OMG Show, which, by the way, everybody, I was a guest on. All right. So do me a favor. Once you finish listening to this episode, go ahead and jump over to the episode that Oscar and I recorded on his podcast. We'll have that link in the show notes. But after pulling out of his 401k and diving headfirst into the muddy waters, he quickly built a $500,000 business in only 8 months. Over the past few years, he's dedicated himself to growing businesses through proven systems and sound strategies that produce conversion rates of 70% plus and ROIs of 200% or more. Oscar came with the heavy hitting today. When he's not focused on profitable paid traffic funnels, you can find him traveling the country out of his self-converted van or sipping on a nice, refreshing mojitos. Oscar is going to join us to talk about automating your value, how to take that content, how to take that resource and get the maximum exposure to convert into maximum leads and hopefully maximum sales for your business. Oscar, welcome to the podcast. How you doing, man?
What's up, Chris? Thanks so much for having me. Man, I gotta say, I gotta get a snippet of you recording my bio. So I'm gonna start using that. It was so smooth, man. I was like, dang, I sound good.
Right. Like, yeah, that is me.
But no, man, thanks so much for having me, man. I'm super excited to be on and talking about automating your value today for today's episode. And I hope the audience here that's listening definitely walks away with some tremendous value they can implement right away.
Yeah, I have to say this. So listeners, I try to do my due diligence when I invite somebody on the podcast. And again, Oscar and I have been connected, I on Facebook, LinkedIn, so, I see your post, you see mine. And consistently, I see you as a marketer who is always evolving and evolving by way of experimenting,
Mm-hmm.
testing the boundaries, trying to figure out why does this thing work and why wouldn't it. And when you have people like that, listeners, there's going to be so many nuggets that they can drop without even trying to drop them. So,
Mm-hmm.
Oscar, we're going to have a conversation, man, and you're probably going to say so many things that are like eye opening to me, which I know will be
Mm-hmm.
eye opening to our listeners. But before we get into it, where you're at now in business, where did you start? Because oftentimes, like what you're doing now is not the very first version of it. So let us know where
Yeah.
you started and then kind of how you got to where you are now.
100%, man. I think it all started about like 10 years ago. This is when I was about graduating college, right? I went to USF down in Tampa. And at the time, I was known as like the website guy because
Mm,
I went to school to get a degree in marketing and I needed a job. And I was working at Busch Gardens at the time, making $7.25 an hour. And I'm like, man, there has to be something else. Like, I mean, I worked in the Sesame Street Safari of Fun area of the theme park, and don't get me wrong, kids are cool, but dealing with them for 8 hours every single day, I'm like, listen, man, this is not my kid.
yeah,
I
yeah,
can walk
yeah.
away. I just need to get out of here, right? But anyways, I found an internship, and they were only looking for seniors at that time to do website development, and I'm like,
Mm,
fake it till you make it at that time, right? That was kind of like the
yeah.
mindset. So I just went into the interview, and I was like, I wish I could say I was honest, but I was, hey, listen, I could figure this out. I could do this. You'll have an extra 2 years with me, like if you bring me on board and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So they hired me, and then I had to figure out how to do WordPress. And so I went down
Mm.
the rabbit hole of YouTube and figuring out how to build WordPress sites and all that kind of stuff. And lo and behold, I cranked out a WordPress site. And so I took that experience and then started going to like my marketing professors around school, and I started building websites for the different organizations. That led me
Wow.
to like meeting other people who had businesses and wanted websites. And then we went down the rabbit hole of like SEO and all that kind of stuff. But then, like, fast forward, come graduation, I actually decided to go into the corporate world and get a job working for Macy's as part of their executive development program. So this was kind of like a
Mm.
managerial position where they put me into like these specific business units, and then they rotate me around after every year. And then in between the rotations, I have to make a presentation to the executive board on how we can improve that specific business unit. So I was like, this is kind of like a
Mm.
really cool accelerator program to kind of figure out how the big boys do it, right?
Yeah.
And so that was fun, man. And I mean, I loved the time that I was there, the people that I worked with, the amount of knowledge that I acquired. But I just knew that, like, after my rotations were done, I had a conversation with like my managing director, and my raise was only like 2%, right?
Mm.
And I'm like, you know, um, at one point, I want to be able to take care of my mom and my dad. I want to be able to take care of my future wife and my kids and things like that. And I knew that a 2% rate, percent raise wasn't going to cut that unless I wanted to go to Cincinnati, which is where the headquarters was. And
Mm.
no offense against Cincinnati, but when you've lived in Florida your whole life, Cincinnati's not where you want to go. I mean, it's hard to be away from the beach and the sunshine.
Yeah, man.
So I'm like, I need to do something else. And I've always, inside of me, I've always had that feeling of like being in business and starting my own business. And I had a degree in marketing, and I was like, I need to put this to work. I need to put this to use. And thankfully, at my time during school, I had networked and interacted with the right kind of people. And I was part
Mm.
of a program called the Corporate Mentor Program, where they matched like, first generation college students with mentors in the area. And my mentor was like, listen, you got to burn the boats, man. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he's like, you got this 9 to 5. You're trying to make this happen, but you're also trying to start a business. And it's like, like, look at your own history. Like the fact that you're Mexican, like Hernan Cortez, when he brought everybody over from Spain, he's like, burn the boats. We're not going back until we accomplish our tasks. And it kind of
Mm.
hit close to home, right? And like that whole idea. And I was like, that makes a lot of sense. And so that's when I decided to like jump ship, if you will, and kind of burn the boats in the direction of starting my own business. And again, because I made those right connections, I was able to connect with the program director of the corporate mentor program, and he had a very like big background in sports and in like education systems, and he had like a master's in finance and all this kind of stuff. So he had like a lot of different ideas, but he just didn't have that person that could implement and take action. And I was
Mm.
kind of like, well, I'm the doer. If you got the idea, I can figure out the
Yeah.
process, I can figure out the steps, and we get it done. So I quit my job. I pulled out my 401k. My lease was up. I moved into his spare bedroom, and we started getting to work. And that's where I got my real education in marketing, because like all I learned in school were pretty much like the 4 Ps, right? The standard, marketing doctrine. But I didn't know what a sales funnel was. I didn't know what conversion
Yeah.
rates were. I
Yeah.
didn't know what conversion rate optimization was, or a cost per click. I didn't know any about those things. Even though I was doing like SEO kind of stuff before, I was just kind of like trying to figure it out as I went along. But I got a real degree in marketing at that point, and I left pretty much a 40-hour work week with health and benefits to work 80 hours a week with no health and no benefits.
Mm.
But 8 months later, we built a six-figure business, and then that same time, the following year, we had generated $500,000 in revenue. And then that happened, about 8 years ago now. And that has led into this whirlwind of online marketing, where now I've helped various businesses in different backgrounds and different environments, from ebooks to virtual summits to course creation, which is kind of what I'm really focusing on now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and pretty much anything in the online world that kind of had my hands in, like membership sites, especially, and kind of has looked and understood the processes to make those things work and be successful. And so that's kind of what brings me here today.
Yeah, there's so many interesting elements of that story. And you could just tell as you were getting the experience, Macy's, and even prior to
Hmm.
that doing websites, there was no way. It's just impossible that you would have known that you were going to take those skills, piece them
Hmm.
together, and be able to do what you're doing now. And one part that especially resonates with me is you hooked up with this mentor. He had the idea, the business, but he needed
Hmm.
hands. He had the
Hmm.
head, but he needed hands. And that's a very similar situation that I found myself in at Lead Pages.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
if it's any encouragement to an aspiring digital marketer listening right now, sometimes the best move you can make is attach your buggy to a vehicle that's much bigger, to a horse that's running much faster, and just enjoy the ride. Right? You'll be
100%.
flailing. Oh, slow down. Stay on it. Stay in the buggy. Stay on the horse, because that learning is. Oscar, to be honest, when it comes to marketing, I don't know where else you get that learning. You can go to school, read all the books. You can do all of that until you're
Hmm.
in it, man. And then, for you and for me, you were in an environment where you had to perform.
Hmm.
And if what you did not produce a profit, look, man, hey, I'm going to go get someone else.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, when I pulled out my 401k, I only had 3 months, right? Like, it was only $5,000 that I pulled out
Yeah,
from my
yeah.
401k. And I was like, I need to stretch this out. And so I still had a car payment, cell phone payment, all that stuff. And I'm like,
Mm.
I need to figure this out. And so I read this book by Paulo Coelho, the same guy who wrote The Alchemist, but
Yeah, yeah,
he
yeah.
wrote
I'm familiar.
a different book called The Pilgrimage,
Mm.
where like it's kind of like a I don't know if it's like an autobiography, but it's a point in time where like he's really Catholic and he decides to go on a pilgrimage in Spain, across the Camino de Santiago, which is like a 3,000-mile pilgrimage from one border of Spain and France to the other side, and you end up at a church.
Mm.
And like during this pilgrimage, he has to do certain reflections, certain like homework, if you will. And one of them was like putting yourself into a coffin and thinking of like your legacy. Like, what if you died today? Like, what would that mean? What would that do? And so like, when I was reading that book, I kind of had to put myself in that same mindset as like, dude, we only got 3 months, man. We need to figure this out. So it's like, what can we do? How can we survive? And I'm like, okay, well, I mean, I can take showers at a $10th a month gym. Perfect. I can do that. Right. What about for food? Okay. Well, if it comes to that, I know restaurants throw out their scraps at the end of the night. They just put them in special
Mm-hmm.
bags. Okay. If I need to do that, I can't do that. Whatever. I pretty much went like bare bones, man. Like what's the
Mm.
worst of the worst? And then I
No,
asked
that's good.
myself, could I survive that? And I'm like, yeah, I think I could survive that. And I was like, okay, then let's go ahead and bet on yourself and make this happen. You
Love
know.
it, man. That exercise, we're not even into the topic, Oscar, but that that exercise of
Yeah.
literally going through the worst case scenario.
Hmm.
And what I found, because I had to do something similar, is it's you facing fear. It's you looking
Yeah.
at fear like right in the face and just punching it. Like, look, I
Hmm.
see all that you're trying to tell me would happen in here, and I
Yeah.
accept all of it and will not succumb to any of it. I'm moving
Hmm.
forward anyway. It's mental fortitude that requires that, man, and that is required for that, I should say. So let's
Hmm.
jump into it, Oscar. You've seen a lot, man. You've seen a lot,
Yeah.
and I especially. We're not going to wait to the end of the podcast to do a shout out to where to connect with you, but I especially enjoy connecting with your content on LinkedIn.
I
On
appreciate
LinkedIn, I
that.
think I think you share high quality, but you also engage with high quality folks. You know,
Hmm.
and whenever I read one of your comments, it's always like I can always tell you're tinkering with something. I'm like, oh, look at that. Like some of the conversations I gotta like come back to, be like, all right, let
Yeah.
me
Yeah. Yeah.
reread what he's saying, and it's because you're so good from my vantage point. You're so good at really diving deep into a strategy and looking at the elements that make it work, and
Yeah.
then taking those elements and doing it yourself, which a lot of
Hmm.
people just want to take the elements and be like, hey, look, I can do some, but you're
Hmm.
actually doing it, testing it, figuring out like what are the pieces that maybe you don't need, what are the pieces you add to it. And for
Hmm.
today's podcast, we I mentioned automating value, and it's
Hmm.
it's essentially creating this this ecosystem or for your content for people to come into and just consume,
Yeah.
and the flip side is on the marketer. We can build it, but how do we do it in a way that really generates leads, converts, and things of that nature? And before we were talking on on this podcast, you were mentioning, how your approach involves taking video and X, Y, and Z. So I don't even want to
Mhm.
try to explain it. I want to give you the
Yeah.
floor and talk about, because this is something that's been more recent in terms of relevancy. Like, it's
Mhm.
super relevant right now, with the way people are relying on social media, but also needing to generate leads, and they're
Mhm.
realizing the two are not synonymous. Just because I'm on
Yeah.
social media doesn't mean that I have leads. So, what's that approach that you've been taking, and just walk us through, through the steps and some of the results that you're seeing?
Well, first of all, thank you, man, for all the compliments. I appreciate it. It's one of those things where especially with math, like going through like academics, I always had to figure out the answer first and work backwards to figure out
Mm,
how that answer came to be.
wow.
I was never one to actually like be able to problem solve. It's just something that like I don't know, it just didn't click for me. So when I look for strategies online, like I'm looking for things that I can implement into my own business because I'm not just like a marketing consultant and coach. Like I actually run a business like day to day to make sure that I'm actually, doing the right thing. So that way, when I do
Right.
teach marketing, it's from the battlefield. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's stuff that's
Yeah.
working. And like one of the things that I see and that I tested for myself was like this whole idea of doing like a video a day. So from 2023, from January 2nd to the end of March, I did a video a day on all those platforms. And I can tell you that by doing that, I only gained about maybe 15 followers, but no email signups.
Wow.
You know what I'm saying?
Wow.
I got some pretty good views, but it just wasn't there. And of course, there's reasons for that. There's like the algorithm. There's also like the quality of content. So it's not like I'm making these huge over produced videos. It's literally just me like answering a question. I was just kind of doing that. Like I needed something that could fit the kind of business that I want to run.
Sure.
I
Sure.
would love to have high produced videos, but it's like we have to look at return on effort. Like, is it worth spending 4 hours on a 15-second video that it doesn't have a long shelf life? Like, I don't know. To me, the answer is no, right?
Yeah.
Now, the other thing though is that like content does have place. Content does have value. Like you look at podcasting, right? You look at like long form YouTube videos. Those content pieces really do perform really, really well. The issue is that it's a thing of like consistency of applying over
Yeah.
time, right? And the thing is that I'll be the first to admit that like I've never been able to build a business organically. Like I'm not the guy you come and talk to for SEO, for content, for YouTube marketing. When
Hmm.
it comes to paid ads, that's my forte. I know how to get cold traffic to convert. And the thing is that, this is a strategy that I was like tinkering with back in 2018 when like back then it was like the wild wild west with Facebook ads, right? Like you can put in like $10 and get like $200 out of it, and it was super easy, and everybody was having a good time.
Hmm.
And the whole idea, back then was like, how do we use an ad and figure out like the media? The media is 80% of the ad success, and the whole campaign setup is all about like how can I test my media fast so I can figure out which one is converting at the right key performance indicators that I need. And what I realize now is that in today's world with privacy policies and everything that's happening, it's no longer about sending people to your website. You have to keep people on the platform. Facebook
Mm.
wants you to keep people on the platform. YouTube wants you to keep people on the platform. Same thing with LinkedIn. Part of that reason is because they just can't track. Like you can set up a conversion API, you can have server to server integration, and if those words, are sound like a different language to you, it's because it is. It's a completely different way of setting up ads. It's not as easy as just like installing the pixel on your website and calling it a day. There's a little bit more involved.
Yeah.
And so the thing is that like for most people that are out there, most business owners, like let's say you're a professional, you've been doing this for 30 years and you just want to sell a course or you just want to leverage and productize your knowledge to, include an extra revenue stream. Most people don't want to hire like a six-figure or even a five-figure agency to set that up, right? So the whole thing is like we have to figure out how we can implement a strategy where we are being rewarded by the platform that we're choosing. So in this case, like let's say Facebook,
Hmm.
but also how can we leverage content? Because from what I've seen, whenever someone comes through, let's say a high quality podcast or a high quality YouTube video, they've invested their time And time for me is much better than, for example, a lead that came through a free lead magnet kind of a thing, right?
Hmm.
So if we're looking at time in terms of what does it take them to consume, the more they have to do, the higher quality of lead that is. So for me, that's kind of where it started to click, where I'm like, okay, you know what? Let's go back to the strategy I had in 2018 of like, let's use content on the front end, and let's kind of figure this out. And so the whole idea is, if you know something that you know how to do really well, let's say someone is asking you like, how do you do this particular thing over and over again, and it might be something super silly to you, or super obvious to you, but whenever you tell it to them, it's like, they're in shock, their mouth is open, they're like, dude, you just blew my mind. That's the kind of piece of content you want to put first and foremost out there.
Mm.
And the beauty of putting that content out there is, number one, it's content. So Facebook rewards you if people comment, share that content, because it's content, it's not an ad, right? So even though you're spending money to promote that piece of content, Facebook will then slingshot your results. You'll get more reach, you'll get more impressions, you'll get more engagement on that content. The beauty of it is that if it's a video, you can retarget the amount of people that watch that video. So, for example, if you have a 5-minute video, you can retarget people who have watched 3 seconds, 10 seconds, 15 seconds, 25% views,
Mm.
50% views, 75%. So for me, the benchmark is kind of 25%. So this is kind of getting into more technical things, but right now, the Facebook pixel, if you're sending someone to your website, it needs at least 50 conversions within a 7-day window in order for it to optimize itself. So if your lead costs you $10 to get onto your email list, then you need to spend essentially $500 to get that lead to go to your website. The problem is the pixel, the way it is right now, can't see all those conversions. It can only track maybe about 20% of those conversions,
Mm.
which means that within that 7-day window, you now need to double or even triple your budget in order to get those trackable conversions so that the Facebook pixel can optimize. In other words, if you've been running ads and you see your ads getting stuck in the learning phase, this is what's happening. You just don't have enough data. Even though you're getting the leads and you're seeing them, Facebook just can't read the data. But if you use video, it's on the platform. Facebook can track anything
Mm.
that's on its platform. You're not relying on pixel data, you're relying on Facebook's actual on platform data. So then when you retarget the people that have watched your video, you're retargeting all those people that watched your video, not just a portion of it. And then you can send them to what I would, what Facebook calls a lead ad. So this
Okay.
is an ad that's on Facebook that automatically gives you their name and their email. And this is the name and email that you can then later use to create, for example, custom audiences or lookalike audiences. It's a simple one click, boom, there it is. And now they're part of your email list, but it's all on the Facebook ad platform.
Wow. So you're. I remember as you're saying this, I was working with. I can't remember. Man, it's been so many years, but um, I was working with an ads person, and they told me something similar to that. And one of our, I think on my email, I sent an email to my email list that drove them to a page on my website.
Mm-hmm.
And it was essentially the same page. I was using a blog. I was using a blog as the conversion content piece.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I also had Facebook ads driving to that same page. And the idea was giving them content, grab the opt in at the end. If they leave,
Mm-hmm.
exit intent. Right. That was
Mm-hmm.
the overall simple strategy, but it was a video ad. And what he ended up having me do, or they, I can't remember who was. Anyways, I'll waste time trying to figure out who it was. But
Yeah.
what ended up happening is they had me embed the video from Facebook on my
Mm-hmm.
website. And
Mm-hmm.
you just brought me back to that, because that point I was like, well, why can't we just use a YouTube embed? We want them to get on
Mm-hmm.
the website and get the email. But now I'm starting to see that perhaps they were a bit ahead of their time. This was
Mm-hmm.
many many years ago, and having it's one thing because you said on Facebook. So if I
Mm-hmm.
click play on Facebook, it's tracking. But also, and I'm asking you here, Oscar. I'm not telling you. If I did that on my website, took that same video and embedded it on my website, do I get the same tracking performance?
That is a good call out, because I mean, like, this whole thing with video is not like it's a new strategy. Like, you've been able to
Yeah,
do this for years. You know what I'm saying? Like,
right.
it's just what's working for me now. And I was like, dude, I should have been doing this since back then. It just you're so focused on getting the results that most people just aren't patient enough to wait for the videos to do their thing. And I
Yeah.
think that's kind of what happened to me. But now I'm realizing video is kind of the key. Now, as far as I know, right, the tracking is more important, or is more on point, I should say, when you're actually on the platform. The
Okay.
minute that embed video, and I would probably assume that as long as you're logged into Facebook, that embed video would probably work. But if you're
Right.
not logged into Facebook, then it's just
I
another
see.
view,
Yeah.
right? You
Yeah.
know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah.
Because now you're relying on like pixel data that's on your website. It doesn't know who's actually watching that video. So I'm assuming the safer bet would be to just keep it on the platform.
Yeah.
But that's a good point where, I mean, you can embed a video, any kind of video from Facebook onto your website, like you would a YouTube video, and that could be another potential way to track. And that to me is already giving me some ideas that we could potentially play with and have fun,
Yeah,
have
see,
fun implementing.
this is the
Yeah,
beauty of it,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And we're staying along this line of creating some content that
Hmm.
will resonate, and then putting it on platform to get tracking beyond impressions, right?
Yes.
Tracking beyond just a
Yes.
click. If I have a 2 to 3 minute video, somebody that watches 15 seconds is should be treated differently than somebody who's watched the entire 3 minutes, right?
100%.
And
See, yeah,
Facebook gives us that, or the platforms give us that, right?
correct. And so like that's like for me, like the metric that I look at first is who's viewed 25%, because like the whole key with using video campaigns is you need to build your retargeting audience big enough. And so in order for you to have an audience that you can retarget, you need to have at least 1,000 contacts in there, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
what that means is that if you're running a video, and we're looking at, let's say, 25%, you need at least 1,000 people who have watched at least 25% of that video in order for you to retarget them. So
yeah.
the strategy is like, let's get those 1,000 views as fast as possible, and
Yes.
then divert the budget to then retarget them and get them onto the list. And so the reason I like this strategy is because if you want to create content for YouTube and LinkedIn and all that kind of stuff, feel free. But the thing is that, like, I'm pretty sure most of your listeners already have a piece of killer content that
Yeah.
nobody is seeing, that
Right.
nobody has watched, that's just sitting there collecting digital dust. And it's like all you really need to do is polish that off a little bit, cut it up into a 5 minute video, and advertise that to cold traffic, and you forget about it. Put $5 a day behind it, so $150 a month, and you just let it go, let it play out. Right? It's going to collect those views, but you're building kind of what I call like your invisible list, because Facebook tracks
Mm,
all of this information, right? And
yeah.
it's all there ready for you to create a custom audience. At any given time, you can go ahead and be like, okay, I want to see the people that have watched all my videos for the past year. I want to create this custom audience. And then you can tell Facebook, okay, you know what? All these people, I now want you to create a list of like 2.1 million by creating a lookalike audience. And then you can just copy and paste, repeat that, use that same video to that now essentially hyper
Yeah.
targeted audience, and get even better results with better margins.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah. I would say I think the mistake that I see a lot of entrepreneurs make, seasoned and non and bland,
Mhm.
right, is that when they go out to, it's almost like as a kid. I grew up in the north, so we had snow days,
Mhm.
and you would go and you would prepare to go outside, right? Well, I need to get my boots, I need to get my snowsuit, I need to get my hat and gloves, and then you go outside, and that's the event. I'm outside, right? And you can play and all of those things. I feel like
Uh-huh.
people take that approach to advertising, like, okay, once I get my website together, once I get this, and once I get that, I'm gonna
Right.
be generating leads on social media. And it's like,
Mhm.
that's not actually it, right? Like there's
Right.
an intentional, strategic approach to this thing that says,
Mhm.
okay, instead of me thinking because I'm on the platform, I've arrived, I'm
Mhm.
doing it. Let me start to say, okay, let me start preparing the platform. Let me
Mhm.
start getting some content out there that will
Mhm.
start generating some views and start populating these lists so that I can then truly say, okay, I'm here to put this advertisement or this content in front of this group of people. But so
Mhm.
oftentimes, man, and I guess the snow is a good analogy too, because it's cold.
Yeah,
right? But
yeah,
so many
yeah,
times people go to those cold audiences and just think you're going to put something in front of them, and then it money and leads are
yeah,
going to come in, man.
yeah. And it's kind of like a video is much. It's a much more affordable way of testing your messaging, because
Yeah,
like
yeah.
for example, so we can get into like how do we actually start building a list and all that kind of stuff. But like to give you an example, so when ChatGPT first came out, I went like deep into it, and I was like, okay, how can I use this? How can I
Hmm.
help out course creators with it?
Yeah.
So I created a workshop on like literally in 1 hour. We'll create your landing page. We'll create a 7-day email sequence. We'll set up your ads. All of that within an hour
Mm.
using ChatGPT, right? So I decided to advertise that $8. Let me just see if I can get some quick people to bite. To reach 1,000 people, like so, cost per impressions was costing me about $33. Okay, which is it's kind of pricey. Normally, I want to be at around $10 for a cost per thousand,
Hmm.
depending on the campaigns that I'm running. Right. I did the same thing, but with video. I used a video, and I was like, "Hey, watch this 6-minute video, and I'll show you how to get your lead magnet done with ChatGPT." Targeting the same interests, the same audience, all that stuff. My CPM went from $33 to $4.50. So to reach a
Mm.
thousand people
Wow.
from $30 to now $4, right? I can now reach more people, right? And those that watch my video, I can then retarget to at a later given time, right?
Yeah.
So let's say I created a video and nobody watched it. Okay, well maybe it cost me $5 or $10 as opposed to having, traditionally most people will say, okay, when you're first running an ad campaign and you want to generate leads, a good budget is about $100 a day,
Mm.
especially if it's like a self-liquidating funnel where you have like some kind of tripwire or low ticket offer behind an opt-in page. $100 a day. Or they'll say like, what is this customer worth to you at the end of the month? Okay, then we're going to look at those metrics, and then we're going to figure out what your cost per click and cost per lead should be,
Yeah.
which is fine. That's great. You can definitely kind of reverse engineer the math and do it that way. But it's still pretty pricey for those if you're just starting out. Also,
Yeah.
it could also be a pretty expensive way of testing. A video, you can come up with the topic, the idea, create the video, and test it. And within $10, $15, you know if that video is going to work or not. So it's a good way of
Yeah.
testing your ideas pretty quick. Now, in terms of like, what does this actually mean? I mean, like that video that I did with ChatGPT, so I created that video, and I then in the copy was kind of like, hey, by the way, if you want some more prompts that'll help you with ChatGPT, comment down below. Okay. So what ended up happening was as I advertised this video, people would comment on this ad, which then of course helps me because Facebook sees this as content, right?
Yes.
So they're
Yeah. They
like,
love
okay,
comments.
let's show these people, so let's show this ad to more people. Perfect. That ends up helping out me. Now the other thing too is that as people are commenting, I'm going to send them a message and be like, hey, thanks for commenting on my video, here's the free guide, right? So that free guide then has an offer, so they can go ahead and sign up for the workshop,
Hmm.
or they can start talking to me. And sure enough, I spent $35 promoting this video. I ended up landing a 4-figure client from that,
Mm.
$35 that I spent on ads,
Yeah.
right? And that's just one example. Let me not even get started on soccer. That's a whole different animal over there.
As you're saying this, I often put myself in a listener's seat,
Hmm.
and I could see somebody really listening to this and being like, "Man, that's so good," and then like, but how do I know what type of content is good content?
Hmm.
What is your approach to somebody who's got a blog, maybe even
Hmm.
has some videos out on YouTube, and they're like, okay, I think one of these is the good content Oscar was talking about, but which one? How do
100%.
you help them, or what's the anatomy? I'll say, in what you look for in good content, or if you've got a video, how do you find that 5 minute snippet, 3 minute snippet? Is there a framework that you use, or is it just kind of like you got to know your
Yeah.
audience?
No, I mean, I like to move fast, man. Like, there's definitely
Hmm.
the safe way to do it, and that's not necessarily the path that I take most often. Most often, I'm like, let me see what sticks, let me see what kind of
Yeah.
results we get, right? So, like, I've worked with plenty of YouTubers who have, like, they have a nice audience base of, like, let's say they have 50,000 subscribers or whatever. They have amazing content, but they're just tired of creating content to fill their webinars. You know what I'm saying? They're just like, I wish I could automate this process. So I'm like, dude, if you already created this content, like let's figure out which view has the most views, which video has the most views, and let's just put that into a video views campaign on Facebook and see what that does. You
Mm,
know, we can edit
yeah.
it, we can whatever, but I'm like, first, let's just see what happens. Let's just put $5 behind it and see what happens. Let's see if we can kind of get the same kind of engagement going. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah. Oh, that's
if you're just
good.
because I mean, there's no point. Like at the end, like again, like I have to you have to make decisions based on the battlefield. You know, people can come with their own
Mm,
ideas in terms of how to best structure a video, but like I'd rather just use the numbers to tell me that story,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Now, if you're starting from scratch, right? Like I definitely wouldn't go about saying like, hi everyone, my name is Oscar, and I'm going to show you how to do X, Y, and Z or whatever. Like I would probably urge you to kind of come with some sticker shock or some shock value in the first 3 seconds to get their
Yeah.
attention. So, for
Yeah.
example, like I don't know, let's say you're a real estate agent or something, you might want to say something like, if you don't want to sell your first home, don't even watch this video, kind of
Mm,
a thing, right? So
mm.
maybe your audience are attracting second time home buyers. Maybe
Yeah.
that's
Like a
the hook that you go
strong
with.
call out. Yeah.
Yeah. So you want to have a strong call out, but then you just want to get straight to the point. Like show them the value, show them something like I mentioned earlier in the episode that really leaves them in shock, that leaves them with like their mouth open, their eyes wide, like, holy smokes, like I can't even believe that. So, perfect example. I was talking to a guy by the name of Josh Rosenberg, and he's also another online marketer who helps, businesses and get their courses off the ground. And he had a client where like he shows people how to take better pictures, and all he does is like tell people to stick out their head from their body when they take the picture, and that makes you look like skinnier and dimensions and all that stuff. Long story
Mm,
short, it makes you look good when you come out in the picture.
mm-hmm.
That right there, that simple 30-40 second exercise
Mm,
is a really good video that you could put out there that people would really resonate with,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So the other thing I would also include on that is just the consider like the time to watch, right? So Facebook is a different platform than YouTube. Like people will go to YouTube to watch a 1 hour, a 2 hour documentary or
Yeah.
whatever. Like
Yeah.
it's more suited for long term content, whereas Facebook, that really isn't the case. So for me, the maximum of where I want to be, unless you're just adding a video from YouTube, if you're starting from scratch, I would say the max you want to be is 5 minutes, because you don't want a video short enough, because I don't care about short form content. If you're only investing 15 seconds, I can't say that that's a qualified lead. For
Yeah.
me, a 5 minute video at 25%, that's a minute 30. Someone invested a minute 30 of their life into consuming my content. So that quality of lead is much
Yeah.
greater for me.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
kind of the sweet spot where I want to be when it comes
Yeah.
to the video.
You're teaching me something in it, and I'm gonna revisit my analogy here, and I'm gonna change it a bit, and where I'm putting on my clothes as a child to go outside and play in the cold. When
Mm-hmm.
we look at cold traffic, want to go play in the cold traffic. I think I see it now a little differently in terms of preparation, right?
Mm-hmm.
So part of the preparation we talked about is just getting some video content out that can start to populate your invisible list, like you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
But you
Mm-hmm.
you you brought, and this is so good to have these conversations. So listen, Oscar is no novice marketer. I'm no novice marketer, but sometimes you need to hear something that you knew in a different context and a different time to bring it back to relevance in your
Dr. Phil
mind.
syndrome, man.
Yeah, man. So when you talked about from the battlefield, it's
Mm-hmm.
like, yes, there is. Why make a guess when you can have data to instruct and guide your decision making? So part of this preparation of playing in the cold is also you've got to create some content. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, what is stopping you from? I think it goes without saying. I think it's safe to say this, Oscar. Everybody that is looking to do any form of advertising or lead generation online should at minimum have a website where they're publishing content or some platform. I mean, it makes sense just for it to be your website, but some
Mm-hmm.
platform, like you said, if you're going directly to YouTube, okay, I'm a little nervous about that, but okay, because you can now go look on the back end and see
Mm-hmm.
which videos are getting the most likes, which videos are getting the most comments. I take comments over likes and
There
then
you go.
say, okay, this is a topic. I've got my boots on,
Mm-hmm.
right? I'm now going to put my snowsuit on. I'm that much closer to playing in the cold and actually having fun and doing something. So,
Absolutely.
man,
So so
that's good,
so
man.
let me add to your analogy because I
Okay.
spent my first winter last year. But this was my first winter ever, right? So, because like I didn't know how to prep, so I was watching YouTube to prep on like how do I shovel snow, right? As a
Yeah.
Floridian, right? So, uh, so I shoveled snow the first time, and I realized that the snow would get stuck to the shovel, and I was like, "This is annoying. It's like extra weight."
Yeah.
And then I realized, okay, the way I was shoveling wasn't the right way. I was going from bottom up, like I was trying to scoop everything and throw it.
Mm-hmm.
The next time it snowed, I decided to add WD-40 to my snow shovel. Okay,
Mm.
because what that happens is that it prevents the snow from sticking to your shovel, and it makes it just slide off, so it's less effort, right? So you can go longer and do more,
Yeah.
right? The other thing that I learned was that it's better to do top down, right? So like we had 3 feet of snow, so it's better to just do top layer down and just work your way down and get rid of the snow
Mm-hmm.
like that. So using video is kind of like the silicone spray, right, on the snow shovel. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and the thing is that, like, earlier I mentioned that, I did essentially a video a day from January to March, and like I only got X amount of followers. The thing is that, like, what I didn't mention is that I can now retarget any one of those people that watch those videos, right?
Yeah.
Anybody,
Yeah.
whether it's only 60 people that watched one clip or 1,000 people that watched another or whatever, I now have something where I could retarget anyone who's engaged with my content,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And again, this is coming from a strategy where the main goal isn't burnout. The main goal isn't to create a ton of content. Like I just urge people to focus on, like, if you're a professional, if you know something and you're getting asked a question, what's the one question you're always getting asked, and start there. Start with that piece of content, and don't be fancy.
That's
Like
good.
literally just open up your webcam, maybe have a whiteboard, break it down. Just keep it super simple. Don't
Yeah.
overcomplicate it. Don't add graphics, but just answer that one question, and then invite people to comment on your video.
That's good. That's good. The one question that you're always at, and let me add to it, and don't laugh at me, everybody, but I'm an electrical engineer, and oftentimes when people hear that, the first question they ask is, "Oh, so you know all about computers?" Or, "Oh, you know all about lighting." I'm like, you know what? That's an IT person and that's an electrician. I can see how they're just all synonymous. And I say that to say, make sure it's a question that's relevant to your business that you want to answer, everyone.
Mm,
Okay. And I just want to
100%.
put that disclaimer out there because sometimes, no judgment here, but sometimes that shortcut that a lot of people go to,
Yeah,
they
yeah,
forget to use a little bit of discernment on that and say, oh, wait a
yeah,
minute. I do always get asked that question, but that's not the type of people I'm trying to generate. Those aren't the
yeah.
type
No,
of
I
lead.
mean,
That's not the type of interest.
yeah, now we're getting into the realm of, like, what are your content pillars, and it's something that, like, primarily I help content creators figure out, because typically, like, I always recommend for, people who want to productize their knowledge to have essentially like an escape and arrival framework. So I borrowed this from like Frank Kern, but I love the way he did it, where he's kind of like,
Mm,
what are your people escaping from and where do they want to arrive? And
yeah.
essentially you kind of build the bridge, right? Like 4 or 5 steps to build that bridge to help them get across. But essentially, those 4 to 5 steps that help them get across are your content pillars. So you can break down each of those sections even deeper to then figure out, okay, what's the content you should be talking about that will then attract the right kind of people, add them into your funnel, and essentially ascend them to where you want them to go. So you hit the nail right on the head as far as like creating relevant content that's going to attract the right kind of people that you want to work with.
Yeah, I love this, man. I feel more encouraged because let me say this and check the accuracy of this, Oscar.
Mm-hmm.
I think that at everything that you've said, if there's somebody right now thinking like, man, I want to do more lead generation, I want to do more advertising. I think it's fair to commit to a 3 to 5 minute video based on the top question that you're being asked or content that you have that's performed really well. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And committing to $10 a day to start to build your invisible list of viewers on Facebook. Like right now you can do that. And guess what? At 2, 3 months in, what is that? $300, $600, maybe $1,000 over a few
Mm-hmm.
months in, and you're going to have some valuable learnings, right? Now you have something that you can actually more safely test. And who knows, maybe you'll get some comments on that ad, or maybe you'll see something in the meantime while it's running that better informs you, like, oh wow, wait a minute, let me try something. You may feel like putting another one out real quick. I know we're I'm trying to contain these to a certain time frame, but how do you go about multiple video? I know that there were one point where you have a different custom, a different, I think it was campaign, then audience, then call to action. I can't remember the hierarchy, but essentially you have like different videos for different audiences. Do
Mm-hmm.
you
Mm-hmm.
do you want to do one video and let Facebook optimize the audience for you, or do you want to do specific videos for audiences and just have multiple running at a time to see which one performs best?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, man. And I think for me, like the easiest way to go about it is like it really comes down to like, do you have an audience or not? Right. So what I mean
Hmm.
by that is like, do you have at least 1,000 people on your email list? Yes or no?
Yeah.
If the answer is
Yeah.
no, then we pretty much have to assume that we have no audience.
Yep.
And the
Yep.
reason I say that is just because, like, in order for us to create a lookalike audience, we need to have at least 1,000 people. Same thing when it comes to creating a retargeting audience for anyone who's watched a video. We need at least 1,000 people, right? So
Yeah.
that's kind of like the MVP that we're looking for,
Yep.
right? Is like, do we have 1,000 people? But then once we have 1,000 people, like for me, like if I'm gonna go after, essentially people who want, work with courses, like I already know I'm gonna be targeting like Amy Porterfield, Frank Kern, ClickFunnels, et cetera, et cetera. Right? Like that's kind of
Mm-hmm.
like my shtick.
Mm-hmm.
For my soccer training business, I'm targeting like American Youth Soccer Association. I'm targeting the American
Yeah.
Outlaws, which is like the soccer fan group, right? I'm targeting those kind of things. And then what happens is once I figure out like my audience, then I can do multiple ad sets. So on Facebook, it's like we have the campaign, we have
Ad
the ad
set.
sets, and
That's
then we
the
have
word
the
I was
ad,
looking for. Yeah.
right? So the ad set, that's where like all of the ad sets will have the exact same audience that I'm advertising to.
Mm-hmm.
And then the only thing that's different is that the ad is a different video topic. So
Okay.
I might be
Yeah.
talking about like how to use Facebook ads, and I might be talking about email marketing, and then might talk about like I don't know, omnipresent social media strategy. And then
Right.
I'll let those go. So at minimum $5 per ad. So that would be $15 a day if I wanted to do that.
Yeah.
And then I will let that run for about 2 weeks and then see which video is getting me to that 25% mark as fast as possible. I
Mm,
would just then turn
yeah.
off the other two, redirect the funds, and then let
Yeah.
them go.
Oh man, I love it. I let listen. I can that part about advertising is exciting. Anytime there's numbers that we can start to tweak and optimize, I always get excited. So, I think listeners, if I were to distill this down to your next steps, look at that, find that, identify that piece of content,
Mhm.
create that video, and Oscar, we're to the point now where you don't even have to be the one on the video. You don't, it doesn't have to be a speaking head, or if it is, you can
Mhm.
have somebody else. Like there's so many ways. There's no reason anybody should be like, but I don't know how to make video. I don't want to make bad hair day. None of
Yeah.
that is an excuse anymore. But get that going and get your $10 a day ads in place. Now, I know that when I say that, I do not mean to be neglect the level of effort that is required configuring Facebook. I want to be
Correct.
sensitive to the reality that that may be a hurdle. And perhaps this is a good segue for you, Oscar. If people want to connect with you and find out more about the strategies that you sell, and even potentially reach out to you to help them configure their Facebook, if you do that, but
Mhm.
give our listeners on our way out, just where can they connect with you, and what can they expect with such a connection?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, like, first and foremost would be my main website. So www.oscarmgarcia. I treat my email list like family. I give my email list
Yeah.
my best. It's not like daily sales emails. Like, no, I'm giving you 100% just content bombs. And I love the fact that, like, my email subscribers are always responding to my emails and just saying, man, this is really good. Or, like, they actually check
Yeah.
in on me, like, hey, Oscar, how's it going, man? Like, how'd it go on Friday to this event that you went to or whatever. So I love my email list. That's number one. Number two, though, is I'm in the middle of building a community called Marketing and Mojitos, just because
Mm,
I love marketing and I love mojitos. And it's a space where it's not only my expertise, but it's also like people that I know that I've worked with that are coming in, and we're just trying to create an environment where it's off of Facebook, It's in a circle hosted community, but
Mm-hmm.
that allows you to kind of share your ideas, share your wins, share your hurdles, but get answers to the questions that you need to move your business forward. And right
Mm-hmm.
now, I'm actually in the middle of creating an A to Z Facebook course that shows you how to implement this course. And I'm going to give it away for free for the first 100 beta members that are in that group.
Oh, nice.
So you can head over to www.oscarmgarcia.com/beta. You can sign up. It'll ask you for a little questionnaire. Knock that out, and then you'll be invited into the community, and you can access the course from there. After that, it will be paid.
Yeah, yeah.
But then, first and foremost, I love podcasting too. So you can definitely check it out at the OMG Show on either Spotify, iTunes, wherever you listen to your podcasts, and just reach out to me on Instagram at marketing with OMG.
Yeah, appreciate that, Oscar. One thing I want to let all of my listeners know is, I just made this decision. By the way, I'm going to extend an invitation to Oscar to come and do a private training. You have to be connected and have your community membership in order, of walking through what that would look like. Give us the whether Oscar will figure it out if we want to take an account from scratch or just go into your account and see, okay, I took this video, I uploaded it here. This is how I have it configured. I'm going to
It'd be fun to
extend
do it
that.
with one of your members, man.
All
We'll do
right.
it with one of your members. See if we can do it with that, and we'll set it
That's what
up.
we'll do. That's what we'll
Yeah.
do. So, everybody, make sure you're a member. Come on now, we've got some heavy hitters, and again, this is going to be screen share. You'll be able to see step by step, pause, and everything. Oscar, man, I cannot thank you enough for accepting both invitations, of coming on the podcast, and then of course just extending that value to the community. Man, this was such a great podcast. You've reinvigorated a fire for me to just keep it simple and just add on as need be. There's no need to go hire a big agency right now, pay $10,000, everyone.
Mhm.
I'm not knocking
Yeah.
those agencies, but most people are not ready for that.
Right.
Do what
Right.
you can do where you're at. Grow into necessity,
Mm.
you know?
Wise
So,
words, man. Wise words.
right. So, Oscar, man, thank you for coming on the podcast, man. Greatly appreciate it. Listeners, thank you for listening. I appreciate your support. And everybody, automate responsibly, my friends.